Hello, so good evening and welcome. Thanks very much for joining us for this premiere of Ez Morgan's brand new work, Feel Something Tipping Under and Towards You. That's been commissioned by The Place and Welcome Collection. So tonight we're going to share an excerpt of this brand new piece and take a chance to talk with Ez about their work and creative process. I'm Amy Bell. I'm your host for this event tonight. I go by they, them. I'm an artist and I work as artist development producer at The Place. For those of you who find audio description useful, I'm a white person in my late 30s, got chunky round glasses, and a slightly garish shirt. Behind me is a sofa with a small ginger cat napping on it and a large plant. I'm delighted to be joined in the digital space by Ez Morgan. So hi Ez, how are you doing?
Hi, yeah, I'm great. I'm really happy to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I'm Ez. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a white, femme, non-binary person with medium brown hair tied back in a bun. I'm nearly 30. Oh, I'm just 30. And I have a gold septum piercing. I'm wearing some kind of gold orangish eyeshadow and lip gloss. And I've got a kind of lilac close-fitting long sleeve top with a swooping cutout, which reveals my shoulder tattoo, which is of an androgynous figure pouring water.
Thanks a lot, and happy birthday, it sounds like, for recently.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago.
All right, so that's us, briefly. But for a little bit more context, all of us tonight are collectively online at Welcome Collection. And for anyone who's not familiar with Welcome, it's a free museum and library in London that explores health and being human, making connections across science, medicine, life and art. And just down the road from the Welcome Collection, also in Camden, is The Place, where I work. The Place is a creative powerhouse for dance development that's leading the way in dance training, creation and performance. So tonight we're excited to be jointly hosting this premiere of To Feel Something Tipping Under and Towards You. This intimate durational film is choreographed and performed by Ez, with cinematography by Eleanor Sikorski. It moves us through breath-like cycles, interweaving textural poetry. The work explores trans-embodiment, visibility, being together and being alone. It includes embedded audio description and captioning. So tonight we're going to share an excerpt of the work with you, and we'll follow that with a bit of a Q&A with Ez. So get ready with your questions for Ez later. But before that, we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So this event is being recorded for archival purposes. So your cameras and microphones are off, so hopefully you can see and hear us all right, but you won't show up on the film. We have live speech to text. If you'd like to have a look at that, just follow the link that's been shared in the chat. You can open that in another browser and follow along there. This event is an hour long and the chat is now open. So we've got a team of moderators on hand to support if you need anything from them. If you're struggling with the platform or accessing anything, or you have a question, you need a bit of support, just plop that in the chat and we'll get in touch. The chat and Q&A sections are also where we really warmly invite you to leave your questions and comments for Ez about the work. Really keen to read your messages, which I'll be putting to Ez in the Q&A a little bit later. So yeah, get stuck in. Let's make the conversation as interactive as possible. Right, so we're going to share a section of the film now. It's about 13 minutes of the work, after which we'll come back to me and Ez, where we'll chat a little bit further, and then there'll be time for your questions and comments too. So I encourage you to sit back, relax. It will show up in this window. There's a little slider that'll appear at the bottom of the screen if you want to adjust the size of the image but otherwise you don't need to do anything. So without further ado, we'll let you enjoy the excerpt and we'll see you on the other side.
A pair of matte terracotta pleather heels stands atop the burgundy sculpture. They are open-toed stiletto sandals. The strap of the shoe is a plump, twisted, flesh-like cushion.
We are suspended in absolute stillness.
Ez's bare feet descend into the frame and land in the shoes, their beige trousers hanging delicately at their ankles. Their toes wiggle as they settle their feet.
Our shining mirror body returns from the void into our mind's eye. I remember I have flesh hanging in this abundance, but I can't yet find it in the fizzing silence.
Ez slowly climbs down the sculpture, feet finding precarious ledges to stand on.
Gravity yearns through us, drawing us back towards the earth, as exposure turns to face its origin.
Their feet walk in the heels delicately across the carpet before lying on their back.
The glow dulls. We defloat. Carpet fibers flex under our new weight, meeting skin and skin and skin. Limbs and surfaces reappear into sensation. The heat ringing in our ears fades, and led from the base, we sigh an eternal breath out. Air escaping through the tangle of your legs, across the hills of my chest, the valleys of his ribcage, sweeping through the basin of her lower back.
The image fades to reveal the soft side of Ez's ribcage draped over the peach sculpture. Breathing out and out.
We begin to feel the density of our bones, organs, muscle, as lightness leaves our bodies. I again feel the satisfying weight of your knee in my left hand, and we sink together in soft thanks.
The large white text now disappears, and the image slowly fades to peach. As his face fades onto the screen, they are lying on the carpet, and they look into our eyes as they speak. The handheld camera points down at them and slowly rotates around their face, so slowly we can barely see its movement.
We meet for the first time, by chance. We talk for 5 minutes, and I admire your hot pink eyeshadow. We talk about what we're working on right now, that awful High Court case in the news, the tiny gestures that make us feel more real. We talk about what it would be like to take estrogen, and you tell me it makes the body softer, more pliable, erasing the hard edges between self and not self. I sometimes hear my voice a full octave higher. What do they call that? A harmonic note. Vibrating at just the right frequency so that one becomes two. A ghostly body hovers sort of up and to the left. The crayon outline breaks and rough scribbles of colour spill out of the lines. Someone made a joke about testicles last night and I said, I wouldn't know. You laugh and I feel lighter. I've been dreaming all week about secretly microdosing estrogen, and now here you are, finishing my sentences and being all timely and soft. When you leave, I have a little overwhelmed cry. You're back a minute later, obviously, to pick up your purse off the floor. We needn't acknowledge the tears.
Ez's face fades away and we see the rosy, textured carpet. The camera pans slowly up over its surface.
I can hear the dripping of a pipe above me. Drip. 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 An irregular but dependable punctuation.
The glossy burgundy sculpture comes into frame. We see Ez's feet in the trainers, one foot hanging, another resting on a small foothold.
Droplets fall, but my attention is whipped upwards, along each globule's path, scaling the air in flick-light gasps.
We see Ez perched on top, listening to the words and moving with them.
Ears lift. Eyes lift. Nose lifts. Sternum lifts. Solar plexus lifts.
Ez's movement lifts them to standing and they begin to dance. The camera follows the parts of their body described by their words.
Sacrum, right elbow, left kneecap, arse, tail, wrists. Both arms rise, carving the air into delicate slices. Lines of flight never converge, and each motion tends towards the infinite. Bones rise and suspend before swinging. Knees knock and spine falls pendulous. Gravity shapes this heavy mass in blankets, sweeping. A fanning mask which feels like it has its own logic, its own desire. It presses outwards, defying sense. Gravity's supposed to pull, but this is a push from the inside. Folding limbs flick and whip in concentric circles, arms, elbow and neck making giant sutures in space. The firm pressure of your hands inside my skin, the touch that sees all of me, the attention that creates space for a bit of reckless fleeing. Swerving masses collide, and the boulders of the body bounce with courage. The boulders of the body bounce with courage. I bounce so hard my tits feel as present as my dick, shaking, awake, arriving. Stuck in the vibration for a little too long, then crumpling under colossal weight, pelvis and heel meeting in glorious resonance. I fall to my knees and fragments of stone scatter across the carpet. Impact ricochets from my tailbone to the space behind my eyes. Crunch. Audible sigh. I realize this is the only name you know me by. Fingers lightly touch the seam between skin and the floor, then trace the same path upwards. Sacrum. Small of back. Shoulder blade. Nipple. Clavicle. Chin. Lips. Tip of nose. Between the eyes. Tip of nose. Top lip. Slipping back into mouth and bite down hard. Then hands reach under thighs, pulling the flesh apart so the inside becomes more exposed and sinks slack. I think about people joking about rubbing their genitals on the furniture when there's no one around. Hands rotate flesh on the bone, inside becomes outside, so the center presses down, expels into the earth, a plunging centerline that sends the head flung high. Adam's apple pointed to the white ceiling bursts upwards into a clenched fist, breaking through skin and ligament casing, cascading up into the ceiling, then instantly decompressing into a pillow of ash which rolls to the veiny corners of my bedroom, scattering, then raining softly onto the soil.
Ez is lying on their back, on the carpet, in a vivid, rosy light. Their chest rises and falls with their breath.
I catch my breath through the mouth that stares upwards. A branch of bone. Taste a whisper of paint caught between my teeth.
Thanks, Ez. If we were in a room, everyone would be giving you a very warm round of applause for that. But yeah, really just gorgeous work. Thank you.
I can imagine the applause.
Hear it. Yeah, it's so. I was thinking about the line in it that talks about softening and becoming more pliable. I think you're talking about estrogen there, but thinking about the work doing that, and I certainly felt myself just like really and becoming more pliable. So thank you for that. So this was, I guess, an individual and a collective experience for us watching this. And it would be really, really great to hear your work. How did it make you feel, or what came up, or what are your curiosities about the work? So you can drop those in the chat or in the little Q&A section, and I can put those to Ez later. Also in the Q&A bit, if somebody asks a question, you can upvote it. If you like it, you can upvote it. And so that rises to the top if it's something that you're interested in also hearing. So yeah, I really invite you to get stuck in there. But I think before we get to people's questions and comments, you and I are going to have a bit of a chat, Ez. So
Great.
yeah, what watching that excerpt, I guess, of course, it makes me want to see the rest of it. So maybe it's useful to start by explaining a bit how that excerpt sits in the whole of the work and how people can see it and what that experience will be like.
Yeah, great. So that excerpt was 13 minutes from the whole, which is 36 minutes in its kind of entirety. But the work was conceived as a kind of continuous loop, so it doesn't have an end. And it's not just that you get to the end and you appear back at the beginning, but it's kind of threaded through the feeling that almost sort of like imagining that the work is a circle. You're kind of starting from the beginning, and halfway around you're already kind of on your way traveling back to where you began. And that was kind of important to me when thinking about how to make the work. So yeah, it's hosted on the Places website, and I'm sure someone's going to drop a link or let you know how to view the whole work. But yes, that's how it appears.
Yeah, I mean, I highly recommend to everybody to check out the rest of the work and to let that cycle wash over you several times, which you can do. It's free, and you can book on the Place website, and it's going to be available until the 8th of July. So you can also tell your friends, and yeah, I guess there's time to swim inside the work a little bit in that way. So yeah, it's great to hear about the kind of the cycles and the loops of the work. I guess there are several kind of concentric loops, it feels like, inside it. And I guess part of that is made possible by a digital platform where you can have it looping for a while. But it also feels very, to me at least, really visceral and really physical that looping is made possible by the digital, but somehow speaks to something physical. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about why that looping structure's been important, or how it's been connected to the other layers of meaning in the work.
Yeah, definitely. It was really the first decision about form that I made, kind of pre even getting like collaborators on board. It was kind of just a sort of oh, that would be cool to try that. And of course, then when you put something down and create the form of the loop, it brought up so much that felt really resonated with me. And I was thinking about breathing. And so the kind of the loop of the work follows the cycle of one breath. So it follows from a kind of neutral state, taking a breath all the way to fullness, and then to kind of like emptiness, and then back again. And through that image, I kind of developed a central text that kind of pokes through the film at 4 different places throughout the cycle. And that's the kind of large white glowing text that you saw in what we just saw. That was like a quarter of that part. And this kind of like central text describes a group of 6 trans people lying in a heap, kind of tangled together, limbs and heads and arms and everything kind of all kind of enmeshed. And that text sort of describes a journey through them taking a breath in their kind of collective chest, and expanding and splaying open to the point where they kind of float off the ground. And then as they come back down to earth, they kind of condense and consolidate and become one and turn to stone. And so the work is kind of, the cycle is this kind of expansion and contraction. It's of emerging, retreating, of being singular and being multiple. Yeah, and I think that to me really spoke to lots of different experiences. I think in a most like immediate sense, I was making this through lockdown, it really did feel like we were going into these kind of dormant states, and I was trying to find like interest and productivity and curiosity in the dormancy, as well as in the visibility and the kind of expansion. I guess it was important to me that the piece of work didn't feel like a kind of clear, one-directional kind of arrival at a place over there that you can see in the distance, and you know you're going to arrive. I don't know, the idea that something is kind of always tumbling away from you was really important. And I think that really began to speak to me when I started writing the text in relation to my experience of transness. And kind of multiple threads kind of coming out through that. So I guess initially the kind of the prevalent kind of coming out narratives that imagine that a coming out is always a one-way street. It's like always in one directional, and it never retreats, it never transforms, similar to transition. The idea that transition could be something that happens continuously throughout a life, and that might happen in relation to others actually, and not be an entirely individualistic experience. It's an experience of being totally embedded and emboldened and made through your connection to others. And I was trying to think about like what transition would be like if it was like that. And I think that there's many ways in which it is like that. The ways that people show up for each other and care for each other in these states outside of kind of gate-kept medicine. Yeah, and I guess also this thing about like visibility and invisibility. So I think that we have a politics now which is thinking a lot about sort of like representation and the visibility of marginalized and marginalized groups. And I guess often what that fails to see is the violence or the difficulty or of that visibility, and the kind of, particularly with the hypervisibility of trans people, particularly trans femmes of color. And so, yeah, I was trying to think about what would it be like to actually sit in the kind of, I felt desires actually to go back to a kind of more consolidated, less visible, less open and available kind of state. You know, actually these states of dormancy are just as important, the spaces of healing, spaces of quiet. And that felt it felt like a generative thing to be making that in lockdown, when that was kind of forced on us, but that there was a way to kind of find positivity in it.
Yeah, that makes me think about this, like the notion of like fallowness in terms of like agriculture and growth, like soil and plants and stuff, that it's not that the winter time is like, you know, death and destruction or absence, but rather actually it's the time of, like you say, consolidating and kind of underground processes that then allow a re-emergence or a burgeoning to happen. And it's that cycle that I think is really beautifully evoked in the work. There's also
I definitely feel like I've had a fallow year. That's why I think I'm like I'm still 29. This year didn't happen.
Yeah, we're still back there. It didn't happen yet. But there's something also about the particular potency of the breath as a holder of those things as well, right? Like citing it in a physical process that we all can experience. I mean, as long as we're alive, we experience breath. And also, I suppose, breath and lungs and respiration being quite a fraught topic over this period. And I don't know if that was present in a way. It feels like quite an antidote to that anxiety somehow, this work. There's sort of settling into breath, or a reassurance around the breath as an anchor that feels quite powerful.
Yeah, I think that was totally accidental, but I did just sort of think about that relatively recently, and about being lying with other people breathing together, because it's not been possible. So yeah, I don't think that was an accident. It definitely wasn't on purpose, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's also something in that, I think, that, and through particularly in the quality of movement and the quality of the text, which is, I think you brought up the word curiosity. It's kind of often like searching or bringing into language or articulating felt experience, and like a real attention to presence in the body, like embodied presence, like fleshiness in all of its kind of goopy awkwardness. And that feels also really important somehow, that quality of the work now feels kind of important. And I just wondered kind of how, what that process was for you in bringing attention to sort of presence, firstly, and then secondly, I suppose, what you hope to invoke in an audience around thinking about presence or their own embodiment.
Yeah, I think it's funny you use the word presence, because I'm thinking a lot in this work about presentness, like being present and being in the present, being like now rather than later or before. And I think that there's been something about the last year or so that has often made me feel quite nostalgic, or it's made me like project into the future. And this work to me was a kind of invitation to myself, and hopefully to audiences or whoever it is that's engaging with it, to kind of stay with the present and to, I don't know, it's been difficult not to dissociate. It's been difficult to have an embodied sense of self, a sense of your own body and of your flesh moving. And so, yeah, I think literally where it kind of came from was that I was trying in lockdown to do these little kind of dance scores in my bedroom, and they were like somewhat satisfying but also unsatisfying, because there's not enough space and there's no people around. And so I was afterwards trying to kind of free write, almost kind of expanding on those experiences, and kind of doing this kind of like searching, like almost like imagining what it would be like to feel more embodied, kind of like projecting a kind of hopeful embodiment, which was a kind of like trust and a belief in like the present, but also of like being able to like remake it through the different kinds of layers of the work.
I mean, that's isn't it? And it speaks a lot about the sort of potential for change, or like openness for change and transformation in all of its ways of becoming. And it also makes me think about this kind of porousness that you describe between, say, these 6 people, but also maybe in a sense through our screens, in a way, like how we are also separate as we experience this digitally. But like it put me in mind of the way that kind of presence, or that attention that's brought to the body, actually changes the way that we can create connection with other people, and how important that is, especially now when we've all been isolated, or a lot of us have been very isolated for quite a long time.
Yeah, I really hoped that would be the case in a way. Like, I was thinking a lot. There's these 2 texts throughout, 2 texts in the work where I'm like facing the camera and speaking directly to the camera. And both of those texts describe meetings between myself and a stranger, or like a person that I'd just met. And both of them trans people that I bumped into, kind of not expecting to, or not necessarily expecting to meet them or expecting anything from them. But somehow they were such charged moments when they happened in real life. And I was thinking about the the importance of the connections between, like, the eye contact, the dancing with someone, the kind of the things that happen kind of co-constitutively. And I guess, what I was really hoping was that by having a particular relationship to the camera, to the person on the other side of the camera, that I might be able to evoke some of that kind of slipperiness between, like, is it me or is it you? I feel like there was something about those meetings where I felt like things just suddenly became more possible, like worlds open up in a very small conversation. I think particularly as a trans person, like meeting another trans person, there's something about the way that the gaze works, the way that you are seen, and the way that you can kind of like feed into each other's energies, that makes everything more possible. It makes everything feel more real. And I think that there's something about that that's really a universal experience. Like, it's not just about that. I think that we really do make ourselves in relation to other people. And that was something that was really trying to kind of work with. So when me and Ellie were making the film, we were really trying to get a sense that, like, there was like real eye contact in those moments. And that those moments might stand out from other moments that are more kind of internal or alone.
Yeah, that's that. I think that's really, really powerful and feels very potent, actually, the gaze through the camera or across the camera. But this feeling that we regulate our systems, but like literally our bodies are kind of built through attunement and through, I guess, feeling seen and understood or held, or, you know, all of those things that shape us. And it's just a kind of really gorgeous exploration of that. I had some other questions about the sort of the layers of the text and the movement, and there's some people who've already put a couple of questions about that, and I just thought I might bring those in. So somebody's asked here, I enjoyed the audio description elements of the voiceover so much, and how they were treated seriously as part of the work. Also, how this then cuts to where you're thinking about, at one point, rubbing on furniture. Could you talk a little bit about how you wrote this description or the voiceover? So I suppose in that question is also the relationship between the poetry that you wrote and the audio description, and I guess like how you wrote those in process and how they came together in the work that we've just seen.
The text the person was just referring to, where I'm kind of dancing, that was a text, a piece of poetry that was written kind of standalone, relatively early, before I knew really what shape the text the work would take. And then I kind of was like, oh, could this be used as audio description? What would it be like to dance this dance that was actually a memory of a dance? So it was a dance that I did in lockdown and then wrote about, and then that text has been kind of morphed, and then I've re-danced it. And so, it was a real, a bit of a tricky kind of back and forth, trying to think about how you then use that as a score for dancing, those instructions, so that the two might actually be able to meet and speak to each other. But the rest of the audio description was written in collaboration with Ellie Sikorsky, the videographer, cinematographer, and we worked really closely on that. And really, from the very beginning of the process, we knew that in order to fully integrate these things, in order to be able to fully integrate the audio description particularly, but also the captions, we needed to make sure that there was space in the work to hold it. And we couldn't just tack it on at the end. It had to be like fully part of the making process. So we had this like big diagram that was a big circle that had like concentric circles of like all of the different aesthetic and kind of additional layers. And it was like, okay, so this is starting here, then we've got to introduce what it looks like here, and then it's got this kind of chain effect, which I think in the end means that the work feels quite spacious, as a kind of, to me anyway, as a kind of natural progression from those kind of the specificness of doing that.
Yeah, and the fact that they came together, I guess in a sense that's the choreography, and it's I think you said that before when we spoke another time. It feels like it's another kind of, like an expanded kind of choreography, I suppose, thinking about the composition of those elements, but what they provoke in each other and how they come together.
The audio description really is an extension of the poetry with a different voice, and I kind of hoped that Ellie's voice is also Ellie behind the camera, that it might somehow at points stand in for the viewer, or it might kind of give a sense of this kind of two-way mirror, I guess.
Yeah, that makes me think also what you said about the spaciousness that's been allowed there. There's a line that I wrote down from it which said somewhere in your text, the attention that leaves space for a bit of reckless fleeing. And that's really interesting too, that there's the space in it also allows for reckless fleeing. And that's a phrase that someone else in the chat has picked up on. So I might just read what this person has said.
Yeah, great.
I was struck by the words reckless fleeing. Curious about your thoughts on how dance or movement is a way to flee from the limitations of gender, or a way to flee towards a gender identity that resonates.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that the dancing for me, and the text that describes the dancing, and the text that describes the body moving in other ways, kind of expanding, breaking open, solidifying, they're all ways for me to make it feel like the body is less solid, less fixed. I feel like I was trying to use, or I think I just sort of naturally gravitated towards a lot of kind of anatomical, or like sort of like dancerly language around like the spine and the sit bones and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it was, I think, trying to play with those things that are so often considered fixed, and to imagine bones bending, and to try and use that also as a kind of invitation into movement. And I think that there's so much about the kind of the flexibility of the body is to do with gender for me. So yeah, I think the dancing really was an attempt to find looseness. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me think, and I think we spoke about this before last time you and I spoke, was one time in a improvisation when it was like a body scan kind of thing, and the facilitator, a guy called Lalita Raja, kind of suggested that we thought about our bones not as white, but as actually pink, because they're full of blood, moving, and they're growing, you know, they're kind of growing themselves all the time, and it just challenging that idea of like a kind of fixed structure like we imagine when we see a skeleton or something. And this felt really evoked, but also by the colour scheme of your work and that kind of fleshy squashiness. Also there's some other, sorry, Ez, were you gonna?
No, it's okay.
Sorry, it's a bit of a delay sometimes. Someone else just picking up on this thing of like fixedness or not. And another angle on that. So this is someone saying, thanks so much for the conversation. So much is buzzing for me from watching and listening. One thing that I'm really caught by is this image of turning to stone. It feels so mythological and ancient. And that feels like it counters or complicates the idea that transness is a new thing or limited to young people. Where did this image of turning to stone come from for you, and what does it give you?
Yeah, so many things. I think to me originally it was about this thing of it was an instinct. It was like, I think I wrote the part where the bodies float, and then when they come back down, the idea of like becoming completely still, of, yeah, I think I wanted to, like, I wanted to be okay with wanting to disappear. I wanted to be okay with wanting to kind of hide. And I think it's about this dormancy thing. It kind of makes me think of mountains. It makes me think of, like, you know, giants turning into mountains and back into giants again. Yeah. And there is something ancient about it, and thinking about the body as landscape, thinking about the body as something that lasts, and actually thinking about the ways that landscapes transform over time, often very, very slow and invisible to the eye. And I think that often the transformations that are happening in our bodies are also happening very slowly and invisibly, and then they might have a flourish, and they might happen much quicker for a moment. Yeah,
and it also makes me think about this question of visibility, thinking of being turned to stone, and the mythological aspect of that this person was bringing out makes me think about, I've forgotten which of the myths.
Medusa.
Medusa, if you look at her, she clocks you, you turn to stone, and it's like you have to find that, you know, like the joy of being seen and clocked and being understood, and also somehow the paralyzing. It can be very paralyzing, and yeah, I don't know. Turning to stone also makes me think of like a dissociative state where you're not kind of in your body, don't feel anymore.
Definitely.
Someone else has picked up on the metaphor of the boulders of the body in that way, and saying for them, you know, the general feel of the piece was lightness. So just was thinking that contrast was very beautiful and interesting.
Right.
Somebody's got another question here on a different topic, which is, can you discuss what you hope to communicate with the clothing of the piece? I found the use of the worn material items within the depiction of embodied /becoming really beautiful.
Oh, yeah. I worked with an amazing fashion designer, costume designer called Carlotta Rossello. And we really wanted to play with these kind of organic shapes, things kind of like this, that are kind of like splaying and twisting and warping. So there's a sense of kind of movement in the costume as well. Like the trousers have a kind of a stitching the seams so that they kind of appear to kind of twist around the leg and kind of splay open and then pull closed again. So we really wanted to think about the movement. And also just think about texture and the colors in relation to the colors of the kind of the domestic landscape that I'm in. And to kind of pick colors that felt kind of neutral, earthy, and yet were still kind of slightly out of kilter with the rest of the scene in a way. They didn't completely blend in.
Yeah, gorgeous. I think, that's it. The sense of the textures of it are really rich, and just even the detail, the kind of luxuriating in the pleathery creaking and the plumpness of the pleather. You know, I found that really almost, it's like a visual ASMR or something, but also just kind of, I found there's quite a wit in some of that work around the visuals as well. So, that's gorgeous.
And on the ASMR thing, it was really, when I was working with the sound designer, Word Color, it was something that we really wanted to work with. I think he saw that the visual language of the work is quite cohesive, and wanted to kind of create a kind of an auditory world that kind of could hold that. And as part of that, there's all of this kind of like natural ASMR sounds of sort of like creaking wood and bones and skin and breath and almost like glass at times. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I find that really, really effective, and it's great to bring together all those elements, isn't it? And maybe that's another question is in terms of the team that you worked with. So you actually worked with quite a big team on this project, and I guess it's always interesting for me, like what order things happen in, or how you navigate the team, especially when you're also performing in the work. And I just wondered something about like the architecture of the team and how you manage that.
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned a few, but I think the person who came first in terms of the collaboration was actually my partner, Tristan, who's a sculptor, and he made these really gorgeous kind of pieces of furniture. They're these kind of flesh rocks. So I was thinking about how the work could be situated in a kind of domestic scene. But a domestic scene that's somehow kind of softening or melting and kind of crumbling, and also just very, very soft and plush, and actually somewhere that I would love to spend some time. And so he created these sculptures that are, almost as if furniture kind of turned to stone or flesh or both. And they're covered in this clear resin that means that they look kind of very wet look, and like through the kind of the need to make them like me able to like stand on them, they've got these kind of flat bits at the that kind of form the kind of highest point of each one, and I think that they're like my favorite part of them. They kind of look almost like there's been a pool of water on top. I love the idea of kind of bringing the outside, bringing like the landscape inside. That's Tristan who did the sculptures. He was first, and then it was kind of everyone else sort of together. So Ellie Sikorsky, who's the videographer, and a really close friend of mine, we started working together and thinking. We actually spent a week in the studio together to kind of devise the work before the filming. And so we were just playing with the materials, really, playing with the sculptures, playing with the latex. Tristan came in and kind of created the landscape with the materials that we'd gathered together. And me and Ellie just like had fun in the space and thought about what kind of images we could create. And it was just really exciting to see like how actually all of these objects that we'd brought were already doing so much before I even like opened my mouth, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's really great to have the time to actually play with it and make it specifically for that film format. Great. I think we're probably going to have to round up actually. We're pretty much nearing the end of our time. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's come along. Thanks for your attention and your brilliant comments and questions. There was one here, let me see if I can find it, where someone was saying that they felt really different after watching it. Oh, I don't think I can find it now, but
in a different physical headspace now. It's so much calmer and smoother.
Yeah, I thought that was enough. So thanks everybody for those. And I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the amazing effort of all of the team who put this work together. So obviously, performance writing and choreography, myself, Ernest Morgan, cinematography and editing, Eleanor Sikorsky, set design by Tristan Albrecht, music and sound design by Word Color, lighting design and location audio recording by Mike Picknett, costume design by Carlotta Rosello, producing and technical support by Mitchell Soden, technical assistance by Kate Stonestreet and Lewis Holt, audio description read by Eleanor Sikorsky, written with support from Quiplash, captions written with support from Collective Text with Joseph Dunn and Melissa Toner. Special thanks to Outside Eyes, Charlie Ashwell and Joseph Morgan Schofield. Co-commissioned by The Place and Welcome Collection, and made with support from Dance 4 and Chisenhale Dance Space. just rattled through that amazingly. So,
such a dream team.
I know, right? As we bring the session to an end then, Ez, I don't know if you have any last words that you'd like to just bring to everybody.
I just didn't get to say anything about Mike, and Mike was the amazing lighting designer, and the thing that we were working with was trying to think about daylight and kind of a day to night cycle that kind of follows the loop of the film. So yeah, he's been brilliant as well. Just wanted to get a mention in.
Yeah, good one. And that's something obviously that you'll be able to experience more fully when you watch the whole thing, which will encourage everybody to do. If you haven't done that yet, get yourself over to the Place website and book yourself a free ticket to do that. So on behalf of Welcome Collection, the Place, myself and Ez, thank you very much for spending time with us, and have a lovely evening, and we look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Bye.